Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the January 22nd Community Advisory Committee meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name is Dr. Dan Stevens, Chair of the CAC. And let's start off. I'd like to ask Community Advisory Committee meeting. I know that guy. I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name is Dr. Dan Stevens, Chair of the CAC. And let's start off. I'd like to ask
One moment.
Community Advisory Committee meeting. I know that guy. I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name is Dr. Dan Stevens, Chair of the CAC. And let's start off. I'd like to ask
One moment.
Community Advisory Committee meeting. I know that guy. I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name is Dr. Dan Stevens, Chair of the CAC. And let's start off. I'd like to ask.
One moment.
How we doing now? Community Advisory Committee meeting. I know that guy. I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name is Dr. Dan Stevens, Chair of the CAC. Beg your pardon? And let's start off. Like
if they can hear us still over Zoom.
Community Advisory Committee meeting. I know that guy. I'd like to call this meeting to order.
Lisa,
My name is Dr. Dan Stevens, Chair of the CAC. Beg your pardon? And let's start off. Like
got it.
If
they can hear us still over Zoom.
How we doing now? Community Advisory Committee meeting. I know that guy. I'd like to call this meting to order.
Lisa,
My name is Dr. Dan Stevens, Chair of the CAC.
Beg your pardon?
And let's start off. Like
got it.
If
they can hear us still over Zoom.
How we doing now?
Ladies, are we still checking with Lisa?
I know that guy. I'd like to call
If you
this
can
meeting
bear with
to
us
order.
just for a couple of minutes.
That is
Thank
fine.
you.
Dr. Dan
Yeah.
Stevens, Chair of the
Beg
CAC.
your pardon?
And let's start off. Like
got it.
if
they can hear us still over
how we
Zoom.
doing
Ladies, are we
Community
still
Advisory
checking with Lisa
Committee meeting.
for?
I know.
This has never happened when I've been. Hey, how are you?
Good morning.
We're pausing for technical difficulties. No.
Actually, you come into a room, all quiet and everybody's looking at you.
Yeah, right.
Seriously. Mr. Chairman, we will proceed on Zoom and then we can upload the meeting to YouTube later. So when you're ready.
Understood. Thank you very much. I appreciate all your help. As I was saying, welcome to the CAC January 22nd meeting has been called to order. I've asked Mr. Bolton to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So, Mr. Bolton.
Allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very good. Thank you for Mr. Bolton. And let's see here. I'd like to remind all members of this meeting and all future CAC meetings are held in person. It's important for all members to be here in order to have a quorum. Members of the public are still able to participate virtually. We encourage them to do so. Also ask members to turn off your microphone or turn on your microphone before speaking and deactivate it after your remarks. Helps ensure everyone's able to be heard in the room and online. I'll ask Marianne Horn to do our agenda review, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, everyone. We're happy that you're here today on this very un-Florida-like morning. And welcome to those who are joining us online. I wanted to let CAC members know that we're planning to do something that we think you will enjoy in our off month of March when we don't have a CAC meeting. On that fourth Wednesday, which is March 19th, we're planning a webinar for you, and Mike Wilson is going to talk about bicycling, and some various points. He's going to talk about what we call the mode shift, you know, in how cycling is changing, and also information and data on safety, and a lot of things that we have touched on in here but not had time to explore. Mike has been wanting to do this as a presentation. Our agendas have been full, and so we thought we would have this meeting. Again, it's a webinar, not really a CAC meeting, so there's no attendance, no action items, nothing like that, but just for your information. And we'll be getting you more information about it next month, but just think about that on your calendar. We have no formal CAC meeting, but at 9:30 on Wednesday, March the 19th, we hope to have a special program on cycling for you that I think you will really enjoy if you can join us online for that. I wanted to let you know that CAC new member recruitment is continuing through January the 29th, and people can apply using the form on our website, which is at metroplanorlando.gov/CAC. We have had a robust application process. Right now we have 33 applicants. We're expecting to fill 6 MetroPlan Orlando board appointed seats. We hope to have the new members with us in April. As for agenda review, I need to tell you that your printed agenda indicates an FDOT agency report. We will not have that today, as we have a representative FDOT who will be giving a full presentation later on the agenda. Oh, and finally, please congratulate Mr. Jeffrey Campbell, because he has a beautiful new granddaughter, Miss Savannah Josephine. Yeah, and I have seen a picture, and I can tell you that Miss Savannah Josephine is just as lovely as her name, and so there may be a few more pictures floating around that would be available for viewing. Now I want to turn it over to Mike for our safety moment.
Thank you, Mary Ann, and good morning, everyone. We have come full circle again to another safety moment to talk about the move over law. And since my last presentation on that, the other disabled vehicles has been brought into the law. So in addition to the emergency vehicles, anybody working on the roadside, et cetera, just anyone who has a broken down vehicle and has either got their warning lights on or flares, or if there's just people walking around the vehicle, you know, that applies. And which means that you either have to vacate the lane, move over, or reduce your speed to 20 miles per hour less than the posted. But it still does not apply to either pedestrians or bicyclists who are traveling along the roadway. So I thought I'd dig into our crash data. You know, we have very detailed pedestrian and bicyclist crash data. And what I found was that for serious and fatal crashes, disabled vehicles, emergency vehicles, workers, et cetera, accounts for about 9 serious or fatal crashes per year. For pedestrians or bicyclists, it's about 12. So maybe we do need to push for getting those users included in the move over law. So that's the safety moment. I also want to give you a Vision Zero planning update. We are working with our local partners, Castleberry, Seminole, Orange County, on coordinating with our respective grants, or supplemental grants for Vision Zero work. We also have 3 demonstration projects still ongoing, one for each of the three counties. To remind you on that, for Osceola County, it's looking at crosswalk locations at a number of high crash locations. For Seminole County, it's using artificial intelligence through the traffic camera system to look at close calls. And then for Orange County, we're trying to develop a pilot program for middle school bicyclists. We have road safety audit training coming up in February. We'll be doing 2 trainings with Federal Highway, one down in Osceola County and one here in Orange County. And then also want to let you know about our next Vision Zero task force meeting, which will be on March 18th, and that will continue to be virtual. And that concludes my report this morning. Thank you.
Wonderful. Actually, does anybody have any questions for Mike? Because I also have one. Judy, would you lead the charge?
Just real quick, and I know I'm preaching to the choir on this one, going back to, I think it was your second slide where it's not going to be a requirement for us to slow down or move over for pedestrians. How can we get that
Mhm.
to be enforced? I lost a family member for that very reason.
Mhm.
And it's kind of near and dear to my heart here. And I would love to see, I mean, we have the 3 foot, give them 3 foot when we're passing cyclists. So why aren't we doing that for pedestrians when they're walking along if there's no sidewalk and they're walking along the edge of the road, or they're bicycling along the edge of the road? And it's just incomprehensible to me that that's not part of it. And I know I'm preaching to the choir on this one. So thank you, Mike.
Yeah, like everything else, it's just a matter of getting coordinated and bringing it to Tallahassee. I would point out that the 3 foot law, the problem with that is that it's really difficult for a driver to understand what 3 feet is on the right side of your vehicle. So telling people to make a lane change is that much, it's just much clearer.
Yeah.
So.
Actually, my comment was pretty much what G was mentioning. If you could help us understand what's the issue? Why wasn't it included to begin with? Why did they start nitpicking? Oh, okay, only emergency vehicles, only now road rangers, now disabled vehicles. Why are they going through the whole gamut of road users? Why not just say if there's somebody on the side of the road? You know, is there a group that has an issue with this, or is it?
I don't know, Virginia. I don't know if you're more in touch with what goes on with legislative matters. Yeah, I really not familiar with
Understood.
what those discussions have been.
I just wasn't sure if you knew a backstory or something like that. So wonderful. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
Now we're skipping Jonathan and going straight to.
Got it. So now I'd like to ask Miss Rachel Frederick to call the roll, please. I believe we're
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
yeah.
Battler. Bobinger,
Here.
Bolton. Caesar. Campbell,
Present.
Coleman. Council,
Present.
Davis. El Badri,
Present.
Frivola,
Present.
Gus,
Present.
Lopez,
Here.
Mott,
Present.
O'Hanlon, Pigram,
Here.
Pizzo,
Here.
Salas,
Here.
Sabila,
Present.
Stevens,
Present.
Webster,
Present.
White, Willenbring. Mr. Chairman, that concludes the roll call. We do have a quorum.
Woo-hoo. Thank you very much, Ms. Frederick. Now here, public comments on action items. We ask that you provide your name and address for the record. Please hold your comments to 2 minutes or less. Any member of the public wishes to comment and are joining us virtually, use the raise hand function and you'll be recognized. If you're joining us using your phone only, please dial *9 on your phone keypad to be recognized. Do we have anyone joining us virtually who'd like to make a comment? Can you hear Lisa?
There are no hands raised online, Mr. Chairman.
Understood. Thank you very much. Have any members of the public attending in person who would like to make a public comment?
We've received no comments, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Joel. Let me see here. This time we'll move to action items. We have 3 action items today. Additional information is available at the tabs in your full agendas. First item on the agenda will be approval of the minutes from the December 4th, 2024 CAC meeting. Any questions or corrections to the minutes besides on the bottom of page 5? No, you skipped my doctor as opposed to Mr. So it's a small issue. I don't think we'll
My
look at
apologies.
that. No, seriously, any questions, any observations, thing that we missed?
Should have been here.
Okay,
Great time.
do I hear a motion for approval?
I have make a motion to approve
Mr.
Lopez.
Mr. Lopez, thank you so much.
Second, Campbell.
Second, Mr. Campbell. Have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Our next item concerns amendments to the Transportation Improvement Program. Mr. Jason Tartorio will present the information.
Morning, Chairman and committee members. This morning I have one tip amendment for you. Additional information regarding this amendment is located in tab 2 of your agendas. So you recall during the December cycle, project number 447104-1 was pulled from the agenda at the recommendation of MetroPlan Orlando staff for additional review and coordination with FDOT. During the review process, it was discovered, as described in the FDOT amendment request letter located in your agenda packets, that MetroPlan Orlando's urban attributable TMA funds were needed to balance the FDOT work program following legislative approval of local governments in the region. Following coordination with FDOT work program staff and with the acknowledgement that the use of TMA funds on the state highway system requires specific approval from MetroPlan Orlando, the TIP amendment request has since been revised. And one additional note, in the packets that were emailed out last week, there was a minor error. The packets in the TADENS have the revised FDOT request letter, and the only difference is that the funding amount, the funding CARL is actually CARU. There's no change in the dollar amount there. As mentioned earlier, you have some additional information located in tab 2 of your agendas. With that being said, unless there are any questions, we are asking for your recommendation of approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sartorio. Do we have any questions? Mr. O'Hanlon, you're recognized.
Help me out. I think this request is phenomenally good news. You're not asking for a boatload of money because everything's over budget because of inflation. That's a great thing. We like it that way. Thank you.
Wonderful. Any other questions, comments, observations? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve.
Teresa Mott, Mr. Chairman, I motion to approve the request.
My second is Lopez.
Okay, motion made by Ms. Mott and then seconded by Mr. Lopez. Is that right? Okay. Let's see, we have a motion, a second. No discussion, voice vote. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you very much, Mr. Sartorio. Final action item is a request to recommend approval for supporting federal transportation performance targets. Ms. Laura Balk will present the information.
Good morning, Chair, members of the CAC. Happy to be with you this frigid morning to talk about our federal transportation performance measures. So federal transportation law requires that state DOTs and MPOs alike use something called the Transportation Performance Management approach, which is a strategic approach to making sure that our investment decisions are supportive of our strategic performance goals. Essentially, the way the approach works is we look at past performance, forecasted conditions to set targets, and then FHWA monitors our progress towards those targets as a part of our periodic planning process reviews. And we set new targets generally every year. So today I'm going to talk through federal performance measures in 3 categories: safety, bridge and pavement condition, and then system performance and reliability. Let's get into it. So for our PM1, which is the safety category, the performance measures that we track are the number and rate of fatality or fatal crashes within the region, the number and rate of serious injury crashes within the region, and then the number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. So those crashes involving our vulnerable road users. So on this slide on the left-hand side, we're showing the trend in our fatal on the top and then serious injury crashes on the bottom within the region over the last 10 years or so. And then on the right-hand side, that chart is showing the rolling 5-year average over the last 5 years of available data for the state, or our 3-county region. And then it's also showing the statewide targets. So MPOs are required to establish our targets for the safety measures by February 27th of each calendar year. It's about 180 days after FDOT is required to submit their targets. And so as you can see on the slide, in support of their Target Zero initiative and related goals, FDOT has set their safety performance measure targets at 0. And in support of our Vision Zero initiative and related goals, we are recommending as staff that we also set our safety performance measure targets at 0 as well. Moving along to the next category, which is bridge and pavement conditions. The federal performance measures that we track in this category are the percentage of bridges on the national highway system that are in good versus poor condition by deck area, the percentage of interstate pavement miles that are in good versus poor condition, and then the percentage of non-interstate pavement that's in good versus poor condition. So starting with the pavement condition, what we're showing here is generally the trends for the statewide metrics, which are on the left, versus what we're doing here in the Metroplan Orlando region with respect to pavement conditions, with good generally meaning that no major investment is required, and poor meaning that major investment is required. And so for basically what we're seeing is both at the statewide level and within the region, our pavement conditions are exceeding the targets. With the pavement conditions within our region generally a little bit better than what we're seeing at the statewide average. And then moving on to bridge conditions, same thing. We have our statewide metrics on the left, and then our Metroplan Orlando region metrics on the right. And once again, for the bridge conditions, we are exceeding our targets, which is a good thing. Moving along to PM3, which is our system performance and reliability. The performance metrics that we track here are the percentage of interstate person miles that are reliable, the percentage of non-interstate person miles that are reliable, and then our truck travel time reliability index. For those that are not familiar with the reliability concept, essentially it's a measure of the consistency of travel times on the transportation network. It's taking a look at how certain a user can be, that their travel time for a particular route is going to be the same every day, and it's an indicator of how well our system delivers consistent travel times without unexpected delays. So once again, we're showing our statewide metrics on the left with our region-wide metrics on the right. And generally, the takeaways from here are that for the interstate miles, we are showing better reliability generally than, or on average, same as the statewide. However, sorry, backwards. On our interstates within the region, we are not doing as well as the statewide average for reliability. Reliability on the statewide average is better than our interstate miles, I-4, not surprising, within the region. On the non-interstate miles, we are showing better reliability for non-interstate reliability versus the statewide average. And then truck travel time reliability, as you may expect, since our interstate reliability is not great, is doing worse. Generally, the higher above 1 that you are for the truck travel time reliability index, the worse off you're doing. So you can see the averages are a little under 1.5 on the statewide metrics, and here in the region, we're a little over 2. So moving on to our targets and what we're requesting. Generally, for the safety measures, we are suggesting and recommending that we use the statewide metrics of our targets, of 0 for all of the safety metrics. We are recommending that we use the same targets for the bridge and pavement conditions as the state did. And then for the system reliability metrics, we are recommending for the interstate reliability that we use that 70%, match what the state did. But for the non-interstate reliability, we're recommending a slightly higher reliability of 65%, whereas the state went with 50 because we already have better reliability scores than we are showing for the statewide average. And this is what we're recommending within our congestion management process that we recently completed. Similar for truck reliability, we're recommending a slightly different target of 2 rather than the 1.5 that the state is using. That's in keeping with the trends that we're seeing for truck travel time reliability index here within the region. So our requested action is approval our recommended approval of these federal transportation performance targets as presented on this slide. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I see a couple of tents already.
right.
Actually, start over on the side with Mr. O'Hanlon, and we'll wander around.
Well, I will, once again, as I do annually, commend everyone for the phenomenal condition of our roads here. We're so much better than most of the rest of the country. It's just not even funny. And it's good for everyone in this room because our cars don't get destroyed because the roads are in such poor condition like they are in other places. However, I am not in favor of having poor truck transit reliability times, because that also affects each and every one of us. And that's delivery of goods and goods to the stores and reducing the cost because they can actually get to where they're supposed to be going on time. And I think we need to figure out how we're going to improve that, and as opposed to accepting a worse target.
Thank you, Mr. O'Hanlon. Mrs. Sevilla, you have something to add?
Thank you, Chair. So I would love to know more about what's affecting that reliability. I mean, thinking about our neighbors to the north, we don't have ice, snow, salt, de-icers to deal with. Is it really water and heat other than usage that's affecting the reliability? And as things are getting hotter and we're having more flooded roadways because of hurricanes and whatnot, is that what may be affecting our reliability on the roadways?
No, I would say it's more high traffic volumes, and the things that are going to impact reliability are going to be things like either recurring or non-recurring. So recurring is high traffic volumes, which we tend to have on our major interstate within the region, I-4, and then non-recurring crashes, major events, that sort of thing. Those are the things that impact reliability. And here we have issues along our major interstate through this region, which is impacting both that interstate reliability and our truck travel times.
Thank you very much. Any other comment? Oh, yes, Mr. Caesar.
Yeah, I think I have to agree with my colleagues on this one. I think instead of trying to move the target so that we can come up with a target that we meet, trying to figure out why we're not meeting the state requirement and how do we move back to try to meet the state requirement. I know, congestion. And the other thing is, when they look at reliability, are there different times of the day when the reliability is higher or lower? Are they taking that into account as well?
Generally, when we're doing the calculations for reliability, we're looking at a couple of different tranches of times within the peak periods for each day. And I should clarify that this is not saying that we're not meeting the state requirements. The state is setting a target for their statewide reliability, and we're setting targets for our region. So it's not that we're not meeting a requirement. It's just that we're saying maybe our target is not the same as statewide because our conditions are not necessarily the same as statewide.
Are those times consistent across the state? Or are they looking at peak times all over the state? Are
They use the same time intervals and just look at all the different roadways within whatever region they're doing the analysis for.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. O'Hanlon, you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I do. Let's make sure we got the context right. The state's got all of these interstates in the rural areas. Okay, and we're an urban metropolitan area, so we're definitely going to be worse than the state, right? But what I really would like to know is, now that the I-4 Ultimate is up and running, how has that affected the transit reliability numbers? Because we should be much better than we were just 3 or 4 years ago. And then, for the sake of argument, when the entire I-4 Ultimate is done, we should be better than we are today.
Agreed. Now, did you mean to say transit reliability? I just want to make sure we're
Transit reliability, yeah.
okay, because we're not looking at transit reliability in what we're talking about now. This is just reliability for all vehicles.
Wonderful. Ms. Frivola.
Good morning.
Good
Great
morning.
presentation.
Thank you.
For the average person that's just out there listening to us, can you run us down on how the targets are actually, who sets the targets and how they are actually done, so that they can have an idea on how these numbers come up?
So FDOT, they set their targets annually, generally, depends on which PM we're talking about, but about 6 months before we do. Just they look at like I said, they look at past performance, what the trends are showing, and then what they're expecting conditions to look like in the future. So they do some sort of forecasting, and then they say, this is where what we think we can meet. And that's how the targets are set. We sort of do the same thing for some of these targets within our congestion management process. And so that's why we have some different recommendations that we're making for that PM3.
Are we meeting them though at the federal level? Because these are all federally run roads before they become FDOT. So at what point, where are the targets actually coming from? The federal level, state level?
For the safety targets, they're set state by state. There are minimum requirements for the bridge and pavement conditions that are sort of separate from the targets. You know, there's a minimum requirement and then the target that's probably likely higher than the minimum standard. We are meeting the minimum standard for bridge and pavement conditions. And these targets are slightly above those, and we're still beating the targets there. There isn't necessarily a federal standard for safety targets or for reliability.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Caesar.
I do have one follow-up. How are we meeting, what do our target goals look like with other metropolitan areas in the state? Are they consistent?
That I don't know off the top of my head, but I can look into it.
Thank you.
Yes, Alex.
Most MPOs, so there's 27 MPOs across the state. All MPOs have to take a this identical action specific to their metropolitan planning area. Almost all, about 25 of the 27 have adopted Vision Zero. A few others have a more incremental approach. Our board, since the inception of the federal performance measure, have been Vision Zero since day one. As it relates to performance measure 2, because DOT has most control over that, MPOs have adopted that one inconsistent with DOT. As it relates to the system reliability, as Laura explained, the statewide target is based on an average of all state facilities, more growing areas, more urban areas. It's an average. So that target is looking at all of those facilities and in that lens. So where there has been variation from the statewide targets has been in performance measure 3. And that's because MPOs have looked specifically at their study area and looked at what is accomplishable based on the data and not using that statewide average, statewide target that DOT is using for theirs. So it varies. Federal law gives the state and more so MPOs the authority to set our own targets. So there's no federal standard for any of these. Federal law says states and MPOs must set targets and follow a performance-based planning approach. There's no real carrot or stick to this. It's in best practice, and it's really how Metro Plan Orlando has done business since I can recall for the past 15, 20 years. So hope that provides some context.
If you could hold tight 1 second. Basically, I asked Mike earlier when he was giving his report, and looking at injuries and fatalities on roads and the move over laws and things like that. Noting that 25 out of 27, you just said the MPOs across the state have adopted these kind of metrics, right? Didn't it seem like we could leverage our numbers to force that kind of legislation? I mean, we're all setting a 0 for our vision, 0 fatalities, 0 injuries, and yet we still have dangerous practices, all for the sake of expediency. Any comment on that? No wrong answers.
I'll just briefly add, since this is an action item, every year, and Virginia leads this, we have our board takes legislative positions, support and focus on. And I think if that is the will of the group, we can certainly relay that to our board's executive committee and see if they want to pick that up as a position. Mike hit it on the head. Coalitions, make the movement happen. But that's something that we can put on our board's radar and see what comes of that.
Thank you very much, Alex. And actually, Ms. Gus, you have a question?
Well, I have a comment mostly, and then I want to
I guess, well, I know we have more comments to go on, but I do appreciate us going a little bit aggressive when it comes to the non-interstate reliability and truck reliability. I think that because we have such a, like, it's vision zero, we do have to be aggressive in other ways. And when I think about you know, fatalities and all that sort, non-interstate reliability and truck reliability, those kind of fall right into line. So I do appreciate us taking that step and being aggressive, because we're a metro plan area, because we're a metropolitan area, we do really put a heavy weight on the ratio, or on the yeah, on the ratio. So the more aggressive we can be, with the more we can push our fellow locations to do so.
Thank you. Ms.
Actually, to
Cobolo.
comment off of both of you,
Yep.
I tend to think, with past experience, is that the reason why some of these laws come into effect is really death. And I'm actually glad that the federal government has taken a stance where the number should always be zero. And I'm super proud of Metro Plan Orlando taking the stance that they take, because we are a metropolitan area. And coming where I used to work from another metropolitan area that's just twice as worse, I think that it is crucial to always set the standard at zero. No one should ever die in any type of accident. It's preventable. But without getting the information out there, without training the new generation, you know, we've taken away driver's ed out of schools. You know, and sadly, we've given them more technology, and so they're distracted. And sadly, they're dying. My son just lost a friend last week on a wrong way driver. So 23 years old. So just to let you know, I have picked up bodies, I have given death notifications, and the only thing that changes legislation, sadly, is death. The death of an officer on the road changed it. The death of a road ranger changed it. The death of people just actually changing their tires because they got a flat changed it. And so we need to be participants in the mindset of having everyone change it. Your loved ones, hey, don't get out of the car, call AAA, get somebody there, you know, get that officer there. That's what they're there for. That's what they're there for. You pick up the phone, you call the non-emergency phone call, you're off stranded on the side of the road. Don't ever be scared about calling for help. Because, and if we don't send that message out every single day, we're never going to get to that zero target. So.
My condolences. Ms. Albadra.
Hey, I am in support of this action item. I want to just make a quick comment because there was some conversation about legislative opportunities, and also to Ms. Pizzo's comment and Jeanette's comment is just, if there is an opportunity for us to push on Vision Zero at the state level and add, like, potentially as a priority, the move over law for pedestrians, I think it would help move these things forward. But anyways, I am in support of this, and I just want to make a quick comment.
Yes. Thank you very much. And to be clear, my comment was not against this. Let me tell you a quick story. I presented a scenario to our board about where we could, I think it was the state was going to pay for an additional lane going across Lake Jessup. Years back, strictly for active commuters, cycles, you know, basically helping people that had to previously, you know, pedal all the way around Lake Jessup to get to Winter Springs. Wait, let's go across the bridge. There's plenty of space. Everything was great. A comment that came from the board was it pertained to Vision Zero. If one person gets killed on this, that's one too many. I understood. And they shot the whole thing down. So I'm thinking, if we use the same logic when we build our roadways, then we're never going to build roads. You know what I mean? We need to, these are all great ideas, but we have to back them up with our infrastructure as well and with our policies. So that's, I just want to be careful when we're going forward with this. It's hand in hand. You know, we need to have this vision of what we're doing, but we also have to back it up with how we're building our infrastructure. I'll get off my soapbox. Seeing no more comments, observations, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
That was Ms. Gus. Thank you.
I second.
Okay, Ms. Council, I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? We're good to go? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. I
Thank you.
appreciate your time, ma'am. And moving on to our presentations. Actually, there's one thing that I forgot to mention in my initial report, which was actually kind of important. My last presentation to the board, we actually had one of our board members, or one of our members, Mr. Pegram, that actually came and spoke to the board. And I just want to let you know, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to speak and trying to help educate everybody. But thank you very much for showing up. I appreciate it. Anyway, moving on to our presentations. There are 5 today. May need to limit questions. Remember that you can always send questions to Ms. Horn. She can contact the presenters and get an answer for us. First presenter is Miss Virginia Whittington, Annual Florida Sunshine Refresher. Miss Whittington, the floor is yours, ma'am.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the CAC. It is really great to see all of you on today, and thank you for that discussion during the last presentation there. It was very good discussion. I have taken notes, and before I dive into the Florida government and the Sunshine Law, just to talk about the legislative priorities, which the Metro Plan Board did approve at their last meeting in December. And a copy of those positions are in your agendas today, just for your preview. And also, when we hear of advancements around the state, such as our colleagues over in Pasco County, who are advancing an initiative to have mid-block crossing. There's some language in Florida Statute 316, which says that motorists should yield when people are crossing the street in a mid-block. They want to get that changed to stop. And so when we hear of things like that, and much like what you brought forward today, and we know that our colleagues around the state are advancing some of these, and it has statewide impact, we do talk with our lobbyists, our team that's on the ground, and we let them know that that falls underneath that caveat that's in our legislative positions, that safety is our #1 priority here at Metro Plan Orlando. So thank you for the feedback. Your comments are really appreciated. And so we will bring back reports as the legislative session gets underway. But my focus, or my reason for being here today, is to bring to you the annual Sunshine Law refresher. And there's a plus behind this today, because we're going to talk just a little bit about some decorum. But if I had to grade you all today, it has been A+. I mean, you all have done everything right. But we're going to talk about that in just a moment. So the purpose of the Florida Government in the Sunshine is to protect the public from those closed door decision-making, and to provide the right of access to government meetings. And on the screen are the 3 basic requirements or the tenets of those meetings. And that is that we provide meetings that are open and accessible to the public. And accessible means not only for those who may have hearing and vision impairments, but also that it is accessible on transit facilities, that the public has a way to get to those meetings, and that there is not a barrier to access. A second is that we must provide reasonable notice for those meetings, announcing the meetings. Metro Plan Orlando's practice is to announce or publish our meetings 7 to 10 days prior to those meetings happening. And then there's a little thing in the law that gives you leeway in case there are meetings that need to happen, say in less than 24 hours or less than 48 hours. And those words are or reasonably noticed. So you can give reasonable notice That means that we put that in there as soon as we know that those meetings are happening. And we don't have too many of those, but just so that you know, you're going to be able to connect that dot in just a moment. And then finally, that there be a record of the meeting. What that says in statute is that there has to be at least, at minimum, minutes or highlights of the meetings that occur. It does not state that meetings have to be recorded. We do so because Metro Plan Orlando, we believe in transparency and we want to go above what is required to ensure that the public is participating or able to participate in the processes. So what is a meeting? A public meeting is defined in Florida Statute 286.011. And this is all meetings of boards, commissions, any state agency. And that applies also to boards, appointed officials, committees, subcommittees that are established by those boards. And those meetings at which official actions are taken. So that's what constitutes a public meeting according to Florida law. And those statutes apply specifically to the CAC, all of the Metro Plan Orlando advisory committees, any working groups or task forces that come forward or are established for a specific purpose, whether they are committees that are established in perpetuity, or if it's for a certain sunset, there's a sunset attached to it, it still applies. And so also what qualifies as a meeting is any discussion or deliberation, any gathering, whether it's formal or informal, of two or more members who are of the same board or committee. When you are discussing something that could foreseeably come before this board or the Metro Plan Orlando board, or even going back to our partners, if it could come before the Orange County Commission and you are acting as CAC members, those meetings qualify. Now, I did a little Google search and looked up some headlines. And what you see on the right side here are some headlines of some folk who found themselves on the wrong side of this. Sunshine law violations do happen. Some of them happen unintentionally. There are some that happen intentionally. But the point is that they do happen and that there are sanctions and that people are watching. And so we do this refresher so that we don't find us in those positions. So what are those forms of communications? It is any conversation, coffee over coffee, standing in the parking garage, over lunch. If it is perceivable that two of you are having a meeting and the public comes up and they can identify you as CAC members, and it's one of those gotchas, that constitutes a meeting. So we want to shun the very appearance of meeting if we're not having a meeting. If you need to meet, if you need to have a meeting with your fellow members of the CAC, that's what your board services team is here for. And we can give reasonable notice. We can publish that meeting for you on our board, on our website, so that you have those meetings in what is considered in the sunshine. So this is applicable to emails, Facebook, social media, courier pigeons, people going back and forth between each other, shoe and cans, strings and cans. You cannot or should not be in communication with your fellow members. Even to the point of your fellow member sending you a text message and saying, I won't be at the meeting today. That is a violation of sunshine. And so we caution you, because that is one of those inadvertent or unintentional things that happen. You text the chair and you say, hey, I'm not going to be there. And the chair says, hey, I just got a text message from Mr. Hat, and it's in the record. And so somebody could come back and they're just listening. And we live, unfortunately, in a litigious society, and it does happen. So what happens if it does? Unintentional violations as a civil offense, it could be fined up to $500. If you knowingly violate, it's a second-degree misdemeanor, penalties up to $500 and or 60 days in jail. One of the articles, the headlines that I showed you, a gentleman was turning himself in for his 60-day vacation. And so if we can avoid it, again, shun the very appearance of it. Attorney's fees, to have to defend yourself, these are things that could come about. Removal from your position if you violate. And then, of course, any actions that are taken could be nullified, could unravel so much of the hard work that's done here in our region. So what should you do? I did tell you that you can reach out to our board services team, and if you are in doubt, please reach out. We're here to help you. We're here to help you to understand whether the meeting that you're about to have is a violation, whether it's not, or we can post those meetings for you. I'm going to pause right there and see if you have any questions on that part. You all have heard this so many times, but we bring it back every year to bring everyone on the level playing field.
I do. First of all, we are advisors. We're an advisory committee. My understanding is I am able to speak to members of the board directly. Is that correct? Is that still like, for example, if I need to advise them on some matter, that's not a violation. Is that correct?
That is 95% correct, Mr. Chair. And let me
I'm
tell you
still an
that
A.
5%.
Okay.
The 5% is you in your role right now, serve on the Metro Plan Orlando board
So I can't
as the
represent.
chair
Yeah.
of the CAC.
Right.
You in your role cannot talk to the other board members unless it is in a formal board meeting that is publicly advertised and noticed.
Right.
The other committee members can, because they're not serving on the same board.
Thank you.
That's that 5%.
And one other, if you don't mind, so you mentioned other committees. So if I were to go to like tech committee, they're not on our board, so I could discuss things with them.
Yes.
Is that correct? Is
That's
that still the
correct.
95% or is that still?
You are absolutely correct.
We're good to go with that.
We're good to go with that.
Third and final question is one of the first things you mentioned with regards to accessibility. And you said it's not just for, visually or hearing impaired people, whatever, but also transit. It's always been a thorn in my side for forever. Metro Plan will pick up my tab, $7 to $10 for parking out here. They mail out everything else, but they won't pay for the transit pass. If I ever take links in here or I take Sunrail, is that still the thing?
It is still the thing.
We need to work on
However,
that, man. I'll tell you.
we can bring that up, Mr. Chair, to our team here at Metro Plan Orlando, and that is a very valid point. Something that we do for the Transportation Disadvantaged Local Coordinating Board is when the men and women who serve on that board, as well as the public, when they attend that public meeting, we do reimburse them for transit. But that's one of those things that we need to bring back to the board.
Yeah,
And a
not that I
very
haven't
valid
done
point,
that
and
for
thank you
14 years, but
Yeah.
I don't get it. We're the MPO and we support the automobile any way we can, and yet you're not going to pay my $2 links pass. I just don't get it.
Duly noted, and we will bring it back. I
Ask
would
the ladies
expect
in
to
the
have
front.
some-
I always mention it to them.
I
So
expect there may be some change here.
anyway, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your reflection. I heard and processed everything you said, but there might be some people on this board that they might just be friends outside of here. Now, you said we can't formally talk about the things we're supposed to discuss here, but let's say I just have to have a coffee with somebody just to catch up. Is that seen in the eyes of the sunshine as a violation?
Thank you so much for bringing that up,
Thank
because
you.
that is a caveat that I left out, and we usually cover. Because you may find yourselves in social settings. You may find yourself going to the same professional development course or session. You may find yourself at the same church or shopping. You run into somebody in the aisle. That is not a violation as long as your conversation does not flow over into business that could foreseeably come before this committee for action.
Wonderful. Good.
Okay. I guess that's when we put you on the honor system.
Yeah.
Because there's been photos that have shown up in the newspaper of two board members that were having beer in a, you know, it's happened. And right, I understand that how do they prove it? And you know, we just help to ensure that you are aware and conscious and cognizant so that you don't have to disprove it. It's expensive. And we don't want to see it. Okay.
Wonderful.
All right.
And for
let
the
me-
rest of the story? is that
Let
it?
me just move on to my plus. And the plus is that I just wanted to spend a couple minutes to talk about parliamentary procedures. As an organization, Metro Plan Orlando uses Robert's Rules of Order, not necessarily to the maximum extent of the order, not every T crossing period at the end, but for the most part, we use it as guidance for meeting decorum. And on this morning, I have witnessed, just like the textbook for meetings that have been happening here. But in the past couple of years, and especially when it has come around the election of officer time, this committee has particularly kind of gotten wrapped around the axle when it came to motions and seconds and such. And so I just want to spend just a couple minutes just talking about and reminding you of what you've done here today. When the chair calls for a motion, the person who wants to obtain the floor, if you will be recognized by the chair. If we were to go specific to Robert's rules and the rules of decorum, even the speaker should be going through the chair at all times. Like if I'm going to speak or respond to a question, I should look to the chair for a nod or a yes or a please proceed or answer, unless the chair says you are free to speak back and forth, okay? So in terms of decorum, it is the practice here that you turn your tent cards on the side when you want to be recognized. You've done that beautifully this morning. The chair will recognize the person who will be either making the motion. Please be sure to activate your mic. Again, perfect today. I mean, it's just been done so well. And then the second or, if you know you're going to second, go ahead and activate your mic so that you can say second and your name, okay? You don't have to be recognized by the chair for the second. The motion maker, yes. The second does not necessarily have to be. And then once your mic is activated, it does so much for us. Some of the meetings, if you go back and listen to them online, because people have not activated their mics, the cameras around the room, number one, cannot find the person who's speaking unless the mic is activated. The people who are watching online cannot see who is speaking. And so there's that accessibility thing that comes into play again. During the playback, Rachel and Marianne are having to caucus around the recording to see who said what and you know what was the reason that they were speaking. So we just want you to be aware. Again, the microphones, as you know, around the dais here, only 4 can be activated at once. So once that 5th one comes on, somebody's going to get bounced off. Okay, so just be cognizant of that. So you activate your mic, you speak, you make your question, you wait for the chair to call on or acknowledge the person who is responding. And again, everything should go, any discussion, the chair opens the floor. All discussions or questions should go through the chair unless he or she says otherwise. Once the chairperson calls for a vote or a motion to be closed, then we don't have enough mics for everyone to activate, but we're able to proceed from there. After you're finished speaking, deactivate your mic, and we will be forever indebted to you all because it makes everything so much easier for everyone. So just a couple of tips here. Any and all discussion should be through the chair. Your motions should be clear and concise, and something that I did notice this morning, even with our own speakers who came before you with requests for action, they had the motions or the requests listed on their slide. but when it came time for you to make the motion, they were already on their thank you. So it was not up on the screen for you. And so we will be more careful and conscious of that as well as a staff to make sure that what you need is in front of you. So if there is a motion on the floor, a new main motion cannot be made until the current motion has been resolved. What can be offered is a subsidiary or an amendment to the motion. If there is an amendment offered, the motion maker and the seconder must agree, or it goes no place. And then those amendments, if they do agree, are handled as a separate motion, and you still have to go back to the main motion. Okay?
To be clear, does that mean a second vote? Is that what you're saying for the amendments?
If there is an amendment to the
Right.
motion, if there's an amended motion and
Right.
there's like the first motion and there's a second motion, they go backwards in order. So
Right.
the first, the amended motion that is accepted by the motion maker and the seconder has to be disposed of first, and then you go back to the main motion.
Okay.
In the last meeting, there was a motion that was actually left unfinished. And so again, this is just an opportunity for us while things are fresh to just bring it to your attention. Again, today has been wonderful to watch, and something else that our team has talked about doing is when we have new member orientations. As you know, we're going to be bringing several new members on in just a couple of months. We're going to spend a little more time with them and maybe give them a cheat sheet of Robert's Rules of Order that they will be able to use so that they are on the same playing field as you are when they come to this dais. And so the last thing I wanted to call attention to is that we will be, Metro Plan Orlando staff at some point will be bringing your bylaws back to you. We are required to look at those every couple of years. I think the CAC changed yours to like 5 years. So we have to do a scrub of those. And if there are any updates that we need to bring, we will bring those back to you. And that will include how the elections are conducted here at the CAC to bring us more in line with how the Metro Plan Orlando Board operates their elections or facilitates their elections. Mr. Chair, that's all I have. I'm open for questions if there are any.
Thank you very much. Did I see? I thought I saw your hand. I do see Ms. Pizzo. You recognized?
Thank you, Chair. On the cheat sheet for the Robert's rules. You emailed that to all of us, so we just had that little refresher.
Sure, happy to do that. I'll give it to Mary Ann and she can get it
Thank
out
you.
to you. Absolutely.
Perfect. First of all, my apologies to the committee. I have, been a little lax following Robert's rules. A lot of times, we'll have our speakers, our members address the speakers directly. It's, a little informal in that regard, but it's for expediency. But you're right. You're exactly right, Ms. Whittington. And we'll clean up our act here. So we're good to go.
Well, if I had to use today as an example, Mr. Chair, there's nothing to clean up. So let's keep it up. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you all
Thank
for
you
your
so
time this
much. We
morning.
appreciate it now. Let's see here. Where am I?
You are on the second, the MTP status update.
Oh, yes, we have an update by Ms. Taylor Laurent, the 2050 MTP. Ma'am, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'm Taylor. I'll be providing an update on our 2050 MTP. This includes additional information that is in your agenda packets under tab 4 if you want to see any additional information. So beginning with our recent public engagement efforts, this includes 15 events to date, which is a new milestone for us. Very excited about that so far. That's resulted in 530 in-person interactions across all these different events and the completion of 183 surveys that have been completed to provide feedback to help guide the development of the plan. All of those survey results are summarized by event, again, in your agenda packets. You're welcome to review that feedback that we've been receiving as well. In terms of our coordination with the Department of Transportation's Central Florida Regional Planning Model Team, we are continuing that coordination effort. They are making some changes to their model development schedule. I'm still waiting for an update on that. Once I have more information, I'll be able to share that with you as well. And then our technical reports are nearing completion, which is really exciting. We're at kind of the halfway point in the development of our MTP. As those documents are finalized over the coming weeks, they will be published on our website, and we'll be able to share links to those for you as well. You've heard updates about all of those different items as they've been developed over the past year, so no surprises, but you're always welcome to look at the final documents as they're published. Then our needs assessment is also nearing its completion. We've incorporated all of the feedback that we've received from our local agency partners, and now we're doing a final quality control review to make sure all those I's are dotted, T's are crossed, and we're ready for that next step, which I'll be talking a little bit more towards the end of this presentation about. And then our prioritization process that we've talked about the past several meetings as well. We're in the finalization process of that too. So we're writing up that final report at the moment so we can apply the prioritization method to those projects on our needs assessment, or what I usually call our transportation to-do list. Just as a bit of a refresher, our prioritization process is designed around our 5 MTP goals of safety, reliability, connectivity, community, and prosperity. Within each of those goal areas, we have 3 evaluation criteria or 3 metrics that we're using to measure each of these goal areas. As we then evaluate each of those metrics, we then weight the final scores based on the recommendations that you see here on the slide, with 35% for safety, 20% of that score for reliability, 25% for connectivity, 10% for community, and 10% for prosperity as well. We did receive a few questions about how this aligned with the technical feedback we received from our partners throughout the region, as well as the feedback we've been receiving from the public from those 183 surveys we've collected thus far. And you can see that our recommendations are falling in line with the survey results that we've been receiving. So that's good to see consensus throughout the region as we're working towards implementing this for our 2050 plan. So once the weighted scores are put together, that results in a single priority score for each project on our transportation needs list. So that gets us ready for the next step of where we're going with the 2050 MTP, and that's developing funding scenarios. And to kind of set the stage, it requires 3 things: our transportation to-do list, so the completion of our needs assessment, the order in which we're going to address those projects on our transportation to-do list, the prioritization method, and then our budget, how much money is available to be able to apply to those transportation projects so we know what's cost feasible and what's not. And we have that as well. So as we look to develop funding scenarios themselves, those are going to evaluate how changes in funding allocations change the transportation projects that are funded. So like we've said, we've already got our to-do list, the order in which we're going to address it. Now we're changing that last lever. How are we budgeting to be able to implement as many of those projects as we can? As we go through and look at different funding scenarios throughout this year, we're going to be comparing and contrasting between them so we can understand the benefits or implications of looking at one scenario versus another. And over the course of the year, we'll be building consensus on a preferred funding scenario, which will become our cost feasible plan for the 2050 MTP. As we think about these scenarios, they are going to be designed around supporting our 2050 MTP goals, making sure that we are meeting our performance measures as a region, and also providing us with flexibility to be able to adapt over time as trends and technology continue to evolve. So what does the funding scenario look like? Well, looking back at our 2045 Long Range Plan, our MTP, this was the recommended funding scenario, being able to allocate MPO funds. So these are the Metro Plan Orlando attributable funds that are applied to projects. We'll talk more about that at future meetings. But those funds were allocated to 4 different programs: complete streets, transit, bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, as well as TISMO and technology type projects. As we look at this as our starting point, when we look to 2050, how does this change? Are there new slices of the pie that should be added? Should we have 5, 6 categories, 3, fewer? Or should we change the size of those slices? Let's say we keep the complete streets slice of the pie. Should that still be 32%? Should that increase or should that decrease? So those are the basic questions, but very pointed questions that we're going to be exploring throughout this calendar year. We've already started collecting some feedback from both our technical partners as well as the public to help guide us to creating these first initial scenarios that we're going to talk about in the next several months. So the first one, what slices would you include on the pie? From our technical partners, we are seeing that the majority of the project types that we suggested and included in the original survey were relatively supported by our technical partners, which was good to see. And then in terms of the public responses, that was lining up with what our technical partners were showing as well, with the same preferred categories, which again, good to see that regional consensus. We're on the right track. In terms of how big should those slices be, that's where we saw a little bit of variation. In terms of our technical partners, these responses generally focused on decreasing some of the slices of those pies to make room for a new slice, adding in dedicated funding for safety projects. In terms of our public respondents, they followed along the same lines, but in this case, they allocated additional space on that pie for transit as well as safety. So in terms of the key themes from this initial survey, there was a general focus, a desire to focus MPO funding on projects off of the state highway system, as well as a desire to focus funding on standalone projects, not any goes with supplementary type programs, which is good to know as we look towards developing those funding scenarios. And then also, again, highlighting that the public saw all of those funding options as relatively equally important, but there were preferences to dedicate additional funding for safety and transit improvements. A few other comments that we received that we'll be exploring throughout this year were a few requests to change the complete streets policy at Metro Plan Orlando to allow funding for widening and capacity projects, a desire to revisit the $4 million funding limit for projects, so the maximum that could be allocated per phase of a project, and then revisiting local funding match commitments as we look to see what the requirements are to make sure that as cost overages occur, if the MPO is unable to provide additional funds, what are the other options available to be able to keep that project moving forward? So we're going to be using this feedback across all these several slides that we've walked through to help guide the funding scenario discussions that we're going to have throughout this calendar year. Actually starting a lot more at your next committee meeting and our February MTP technical workshop. So if you do have any other questions or ideas that you want to make sure we consider through this initial iteration of these scenarios to help guide what those first ones should be, please reach out to Marianne or myself so we can include your feedback. And as I've mentioned, 2025 is really going to be focusing on these funding scenarios and looking at the various iterations of them to ultimately develop our cost feasible plan and adopt the 2050 MTP by December of this year. So with that, thank you for your time. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much. I see one tent going up to my right, Mr. O'Hanlon. You have the.
Well, you hear me every meeting. It's gonna be no different this time. The only subtle change to it is, thank God this will go to the end of the year, because potentially before this year is out, there will be a national standard for self-driving cars, and there'll be millions of them all over the roadways, and everybody will see that this scenario is not what's going to happen. So hopefully we can get these cars on the road before this is approved, so then we can change it to potentially what it should be before it gets approved. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any other questions, comments, observations? Thank you. Ms. Laurent, thank you so much. We appreciate your time now. And next we have an update on the Links Transit Development Plan. And is that correct? There we go. Okay, I was like, I'm looking for a speaker. Sorry. Thank you. And hit your right. There you go. You got it.
Thank you. All right. So my name is Charles Apitantuono. I'm with the strategic planning team over at Links, and I'm here to talk to you all about the Transit Development Plan annual update, as well as some changes to the TDP process itself. So first, I'll go over a little bit of a background of what the TDP is, kind of a little of a refresher. I'll talk about that revised TDP rule that's come down from FDOT. as well as some of the goals of the plan, some accomplishments from the past year, and some of those relevant plans and projects, and then the next steps of the TDP process. So the TDP itself, it's required by us as a public transit agency to qualify for those block grants from FDOT. Basically, it gives us a chance to identify our needs, address any kind of critical service related issues over a 10-year period. So I can kind of also highlight at the bottom there, we're required to do a major update every 5 years, and the minor annual updates come in the interim. So it does that 10-year horizon, but as we move down the calendar years, that's what pushes it down to the next 10-year as we move through the calendar years. And it basically gives us a chance on the annual updates. It's kind of a report card to list the past year's accomplishments, any discrepancies, any changes in funding, grants, and the like. So, and update some of those financial forecasts as well. So what we really wanted to talk about today was the revised TDP rule. As you can see there, that's the formal Florida admin code that relates to TDPs that was adopted July 4th. And it basically gives us a new set of guidelines to streamline the TDP process. So those annual updates, like I said, are a brief kind of report card based on what's been going on in relation to the major updates that are done every 5 years. And as I had mentioned before, the original timeline was September 1st for submittal, and now it's March 1st. So our next major updates due March 1st of 2028, as our last major update was done in 2023. Go with that 5 years for those major updates. As well as some emphasis on a increased coordination with the MPO. And I'm going to talk about that more in the next slide here. So what we've been doing currently, we've been using the TDP kind of as our guiding document to help with the LRTP on the MPO side. Gives us basically a submittal of a prioritized project list for us to guide the goals of the Transit Vision Plan, as well as the 2050 and NTP and previous MTPs before that as well. And the Metro Plan staff are heavily involved in that process for our TDP major updates, as well as serving on the advisory group for that as well. So what we're going to continue doing is continue those coordination efforts, as well as presenting the annual major updates to the committees and the board. There's no formal requirement in the admin code for board approval. So we're really just kind of going above and beyond to say we would need to increase the coordination between us and all of the committees. So I'm presenting here at the CAC, and we'll have my colleagues presenting at the TAC and the MAC as well to kind of continue to open that line of communication between everyone. So to talk more about the actual TDP itself, it's based off of these 4 pillars that we have here on the chart to the right. So it's focused on our passengers, employees, operations, and plans. And based off those 4 pillars, we've described these 4 goals that we've listed here to deliver a seamless network of transportation services for the region, advance an equitable, safe, dynamic, and performance-driven transit system, enhance customer experience and communications, as well as promote economic competitiveness, sustainability, and quality of life. So now I'm going to kind of talk about some of the goals that have, or some accomplishments based off of those goals. So the first one here, the seamless network of transportation services. Some of the things we've done over the last year that we'd like to highlight. Obviously increase the schedule coordination with Sunrail to kind of match all of those Sunrail on time. As well as some implementation of some new routes. One of the most popular ones is the Route 311 that goes from the airports and hits a bunch of those major tourist destinations. So between Disney Springs, as well as Destination Parkway and the like, and increasing those to 30-minute frequencies, as well as a lot of other increases in frequencies that you can see here. So the next goal here for this equitable, safe, dynamic, and performance-driven transit system. Some things I'd like to highlight here, the ADA transition plan that we're working on. So we're collecting a series of data for all of these stops, our whole fleets, as well as all of our facilities for looking at ADA compliance. And we're going to be taking all of that data and disseminating it, and then moving to looking at our jurisdictional partners for what we can do to boost compliance in that level, as well as completing a minor update to the TDSP for this last year. Some more things on the customer experience and communications. We finally updated our fare payment system, implemented in November 18th to include tap to pay. So now you can get onto a Lynx bus and use your Apple Pay and anything, and you'll be able to get a 1 fare for $2 using a tap to pay on your phone. So yes, yeah. As well as some other things here, some more CNG buses, as well as completing the SWAN autonomous vehicle pilot program as well. Also, for the last goal here, we've initiated the development of a sustainability and resiliency plan for those fleet facilities as well for the Link system. We completed construction on the Florida Mall Superstop in December of 2023, as well as getting to the close to the end of the development of the Pine Hills Transfer Center, which should be opening up here relatively soon. So kind of just highlighting a lot of those active plans and projects that are listed in the TDP here, highlighted a bunch of these earlier, as well as some upcoming plans and projects we're looking ahead, looking at a fair payment study, as well as a bus transfer facility at MCO as they move to continue to expand MCO, and extending the links 338 and 311 into the Epic Universe property as that's opening up in May. So looking to increase our coordination with that as well. So the next steps of the TDP process, so what we're doing here today and for the TAC and MAC boards in the next month, we're to be continuing to present this to them. And we'll be presenting to the board in February as well. So after we've done that and look through the coordination of that, we'll be presenting the TDP to the Links board in February. Then we'll be submitting that to FDOT before the March 1st deadline. And hopefully we'll get an acceptance by FDOT sometime in spring. And if not, we'll get some of those revisions back and based on any comments for the annual updates as well. So with that, I'll take any questions or comments.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I see a question. I see a number of them. Let's start over here with Mr. Bobinger.
Good morning. Thank you for coming. I know we've been waiting for Links to come here for a long time. I guess I saw some design plans and whatnot in your list of things to do.
Sure.
I guess my question is, when will Links, as we talk about the passengers of this system, when will Links start investing in the bus stops? I mean, the idea of drive down the road and you see a sign with a number on it and a trash can. There's no platform to stand on, so the passenger is standing in wet grass, anywhere from 8 to 10 feet off the highway or roadway, and they have to travel through that. So by the time they're sitting there waiting, they've walked through grass, mud, rain. There's no coverage. There's no anything, which makes it very tough for anybody to wait for a bus. And, you know, no matter how long the intervals are, to then get to work and be a productive worker and, you know, and get there when they're soaked, their shoes are sopping wet, all of that. It's just, there's so many bus stops everywhere. I mean, you can just say Kennedy Boulevard through Eatonville, and you've got a bus stop probably every maybe 150 feet, it seems. It's always stopping, but most of them are a sign and a trash can. There's no bench, there's no coverage, there's really nothing planned other than sticking a stake in the ground. And granted, I guess I could say I've had the privilege of not having to ride public transport for years because I have a car, and a company car, but the people that need to get there are vital to our economy and all these different infrastructure that we want to build to continue to help transportation, help the economy. And we need to really look at that and make some investments in those bus stops, because it's just not fair to ask someone to pay a fare to ride a bus and their clothes are ruined, their shoes are soaked, they're getting sick standing out in Florida weather because it changes by the minute. And it'd be nice to see some type of actual bus stop plan and design that the bus stops are kind of uniform, but have the same offerings and the same light or security or something, because a simple solar panel could put a light there and they could feel more safe and not feel they're going to get jumped or wherever they may be. So that's all I had. Thank you though for coming.
Ms. Webster.
This is very brief. I know what FDOT stands for, but in your presentation, there were numerous shortcuts. And I don't know what all of those shortcuts are. So if you could just say the words instead of the letters, that I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's a whole slew of acronyms coming at us, right? Before we go on that side, actually, something Mr. Bobinger said was about pertaining to the stops. can you elaborate on how not necessarily how you decide, the siting of the stops,
Mhm.
but how it's all funded? Is it our fault that we haven't funded links enough? Or is it, give us a Reader's Digest version of what
Right.
the problem is, where the disconnect is.
Yeah, so I can speak to, so as a part of the transition plan that we're doing, we're cataloging all the 4,300 plus stops in the link system. And based off of that data, we're going to take that, as well as we're working on a bus stop design guideline. So updating the design guidelines for the actual stops themselves. So taking that catalog, updating our design guidelines, we're eventually going to look at, I know he had mentioned stops being close together, looking at possible consolidation of things like that, as well as taking the data that we found and looking with our jurisdictional partners on what can be done to update sidewalks, make things more accessible and the like, and make things more generally pleasant. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And secondly, you mentioned specifically, Florida Mall.
Yes.
Florida Mall, people coming out with loads of, consumer items, right?
Right.
Making that trek across the parking lot.
Mhm.
I just don't get the wisdom of that. My thought is have the transit stop up closer to the mall,
Mhm.
Incentivize riding transit as opposed to, taking your life in your hand and having to go a quarter mile out across the asphalt.
Sure.
That's probably something outside of your control, but I guess, is that a fair
Yeah,
assumption?
I know there's access issues there, getting closer into the actual Florida Mall there
Yes.
for our buses. But that's also another conversation.
I see you have a partner in crime there.
Yeah, you can give
You wanna
a.
elaborate?
Yeah.
Sure, actually, I don't need that. Morning, everybody. I'm Miles O'Keefe. I'm the manager of strategic planning at Lynx. So specifically to the funding piece, we use our formula funding that we receive from the Federal Transit Administration to support most of our capital projects, including the bus stop shelter program. That's not to say it's solely on that, depending on, well, I guess before we moved into the pavement only projects with FDOT, anytime there was a roadway project, we use that as an opportunity to identify landing pad connections to the sidewalk, or relocating them. But part of that gets also to sightlines, easements, property ownership. So where typically we use boarding and alighting, the ridership data to determine what level of amenity should be at the stop beyond pole, trash can, maybe bench. There just might not be space or proper sight lines for vehicles to put a shelter where we want to. Same thing goes for advertising at shelters. So specifically to Florida Mall, that was a multi-year project going back to like 2016, perhaps. Engaged with the property owner, property manager before we went with the redesign and reconstruction of that. And what looked at different sites with it, around it beyond just the in travel lane where it got rebuilt. No dice. They weren't willing to give up any parking, any kind of access because of at the time, perception that big shopping days still occurred. It's a tourist destination, but Black Friday ain't what it was, especially with e-commerce, right? So, we were hoping that maybe something like that could have been different, but they weren't willing to part with any of their parking on that facility.
I love it. Here's the thing. Ms. Pizzo made a comment earlier, and I mentioned we need to, when we were talking about Vision Zero, Ms. Bauck's presentation. And, we have this lofty goal of 0 fatalities, 0 injuries, and yet we continue to build like this. And my retort was, we need to pair our policies with, that the infrastructure. Here we go. Florida Mall, if you don't know, is being sold. Is that correct? Like $300 and change million.
That I don't know.
So as the local municipality, allows that to happen, say, in order for that to happen, you need to upgrade it. Anybody else is building a house or building a business or anything else, you need to be up to code before you can do that. I would think the same thing should happen in situations like that. I don't have $300 million, so that's not me, but it seemed like a great example of when we could make those kind of changes. Thank you very much. I appreciate your comment. You might want to be handy. I think we've got 3 more. Mr. Pigram, you have the, oh, actually. We've, okay, start with Mr. Pigram. I saw you first and then. go ahead.
First off, thank you both for being here. This is building on Mr. Boger's comments. Just love to have you here and hear more from you. So appreciate your work to be more engaged with the committees around the city. If as a multimodal advocate, if I were to be spoiled, I'd love to hear from you 4 times a year. If we could have a links update one meeting, then Sunrail the next, then links and Sunrail, whether it's projects you're working on or work plans, I think that would just, speaking to what we said about renewing parking fees, being intentional about when we talk about transit and having transit on the agenda, I think would be an intentional step for this committee to prioritize it rather than roads, cycling, Vision Zero, roads. But so thank you for being here. My question is going to be, your team is going to be the operating entity for Sunrail, correct? From a governmental agency? Because we're going through a major transition right now, and I believe you'll be the operating entity.
I don't think an official decision has been made on that yet.
Okay, I believe tomorrow there's a board meeting where they're
There is a
voting.
CFCRC meeting tomorrow, correct?
Yes.
That being said, since we are strategic planning, we do have it in our plans annually to upgrade our own technical capacity, our own training as it pertains to commuter rail and all the fun that may come with that.
Okay. I think that was it. My only other thing before when you mentioned what Metro Plan can do regarding the stops is I believe what's been intentional with the DOT and county work plans is when we've been resurfacing roads, that's when we do drainage improvements, sidewalk improvements, and I think sometimes bus stop improvements depending on the jurisdictional constraints. Is there any way that your needs assessment could help influence from a Metro Plan standpoint, those resurfacing priorities to say, yes, we want to do these 2 roads, but this one is a heavily transited links corridor with lacking amenities. So we're going to prioritize this one, even though this road may be a longer age. Is there any way in that partnership we can take your needs assessment to influence our Metro Plan priorities?
Yeah, that's kind of the intent with just the ADA transition plan, the bus stop design guide. Orange County has their Advancing Transportation Safety Program, ATSP. That was an additional source of funding to improve bus stops as well. I forgot to mention that one. So that would be the over and above of what we get from the federal side is they provided some funds for the next 3-5 years to hit a certain number of stops throughout the county for improvements, be it rehabilitation or new shelters for comfort and safety. I just went on a tangent. I forgot what I was responding to. Darn it. The needs assessment. So nope, not just with Metro Plan, but the cities and counties that we work with is we think of everything kind of in terms of like GIS mapping layers, because we oversee the GIS team as well. Is kind of put, ridership, comments we hear, accessibility needs, how does it fall in that priority of ADA accessibility, new developments that we're hearing about, and kind of put that together and say, here's kind of what we're looking at for, say, City of Orlando Vision Zero project or Metro Plan priority setting or anything like that. Try and fit our slice of the world into everybody else's project.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Ms. Pizzo?
Thank you, Chair. And yes, excellent presentation. Appreciate it. I want to thank my fellow board members. You've probably taken 1/3 of my questions, gotten them answered. Let's face it, the bus services a marginalized group predominantly in our community. And as my fellow board member had mentioned, the bus stops are horrible. I mean, you're dressed for work and you get soaked or you smell like exhaust fumes all day. It's disgusting. I was in the Bahamas several years ago And I could not believe the beautiful bus stops. I was taking, this is my DOT days, I was taking pictures of bus stops. I'm
Mhm.
weird
Yep,
like
oh,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, transportation people, we understand.
Yep.
And I was showing that to my fellow coworkers when I got back, and they said, well, what else did you see in the Bahamas? You know,
Yeah.
bus stops. So that is a very valid, very important feature that needs to be addressed. And headway. When you have to get to work at 8 o'clock in the morning, but you're at the bus stop at what, 5 o'clock? To get there, it takes you 3 hours by bus. Your day is shot. And if you're a single parent, you got your kids, you got your everything. Headway has got to be improved. That's got to be addressed. And not to take any wind out of his sails, we are looking at autonomous vehicles. And I'm glad to see that that's in your fleet. That, along with the headway, there's an educational aspect of it, because a lot of people are going to be a little leery of getting on a bus that doesn't have a driver. Let's face it, there's an educational effort there that has to be addressed. I think that was it for me. More comments? Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can't see your tent, so no, I know you are. Mr. O'Hanlon, I see you next.
All right, let's start off by, give us an update on Swan.
So the Swan project was completed. It did last a little bit longer than the calendar 6 months that it was funded to do so between the city of Orlando, Lynx and Beep. We got to experience kind of the full spectrum of the Florida climate. Hurricane season, I think we had a hurricane the second week that they launched the program. So there's a lot of learning about the limitations of the current Beep vehicles that they had. Just great data points overall to share with them, and then they can share that back with the manufacturers that they procure the vehicles from. Fast forward, the technology isn't mission ready for Lynx between battery time, speed, and just overall how they can handle operating in mixed traffic, or even adjacent to mixed traffic in the case was using the limo lanes downtown. So we're done for now with the project, but the doors open for future examinations of autonomous shuttles throughout the service area.
I'm sorry you wasted your time with Beep. That is an absolute embarrassment to everybody. However, you did, it's done. Where are you with Freebie? And where are you with being eliminated from Seminole County because your service is so poor?
Seminole County did put out an RFP for on-demand transit. That was beginning of this calendar year. Based off of what they select in terms of a service provider, Freebie or other operator. Our plan is to, and we've been working with their staff on this, scale back fixed route service and to remove the NeighborLink service as deemed necessary, or partially or entirely from Seminole County. That would be effective with our new fiscal year, so October.
Thank you very much.
No, I'm not.
You have one more?
Nowhere near close to being done.
Well, we do have to wrap it up because we got 20 minutes and 2 more presentations, so be mindful.
I'm just, my question, and I'll just leave it to you guys. Self-driving cars now are in like 5 cities. Okay, and I'll grant you it's not here yet. But with the new administration, it's probably going to go countrywide long before the year's out. Those vehicles drive almost virtually for free. Everybody's going to just whip out their phone, these disadvantaged people you're talking about, whatever, and basically be driven wherever they want to go for free. They're never going to get on your bus. My question to Lynx is, when are you guys going to get on board and start planning Lynx for what's going to happen within a year? And I've had this conversation with these folks for the past 5 years. I told you it's coming. Well, now it's less than a year away. You guys don't ever buy a diesel bus or a big bus again. Start planning, okay, with the people who are going to put out all of these dirt cheap electric vehicles that are virtually free to drive, and drastically improve transportation for everyone in Central Florida. Thank you.
Thank you.
And actually, Ms. Rivola, please.
How often? By the way, thank you for your presentation. How often do you work with your law enforcement agencies as far as bringing the safety together within your stops?
A lot of that could be case by case. We hear something, report comes in, we'll coordinate with them. That's more of our safety and security side of the house, but they do have regular engagement with all the law enforcement agencies that are in our 3-county service area. So it is a point of emphasis, right? Not just for the passenger, but also for bus operators. Kind of like the first line of engagement with people if they aren't at the bus stop. So was there something specific? Are you just looking for like a program or a plan, or just generally are we?
Well, just
engaging
my
with-
understanding, the Attorney General of the state of Florida makes all law enforcement agency crime prevention practitioners. And so they go out to different sites and do site assessments on every mall, every hotel, every single bit of that's available for free through the Attorney General's office. Why isn't Link coordinating with each individual law enforcement agency to be able to make safety measures for that? Why aren't they part of your team during these meetings?
We do involve them for reviewing our designs. So when we redesigned the Florida Mall bus stop, we ask for a courtesy review from they tend to be the experts in the crime prevention through environmental design, the subhead.
Correct.
So we use them for that. We use them for the Pine Hills Transfer Center. That's going to be opening up here very soon as well. So that is the primary way that we get them to review before things get constructed or reconstructed.
Okay, I just want to make sure that that's being incorporated because that obviously brings down the liability for everyone, including the taxpayers. And then I just want one real question off of Ms. Webster's, and maybe something the Metro Plan can actually incorporate. I do agree about the acronyms. I think that once the entities that are coming in to do presentations are coming in, I think, and they have to send their slides in, there actually should either be a table of contents with all of the acronyms, just a recommendation, or there has to be some portion of the actual slide. Because if we go out as members of the CAC and tell people, listen, we just had this meeting, we're the voices to our community. And we go out and we tell them this, they're gonna be like, look, I don't have time to figure out what this acronym is. And so if we don't, as a board, say, okay, we're gonna make it accessible within the actual slides, presentations, we're just wasting our time because we all know what the acronyms are, but the public doesn't. And we want to educate. That's what we're here. We're here to educate.
Alex, did you have something to add to that, or? is that
Certainly, I'll
something
be very brief. Yes,
unrelated?
taking great comments today on speaking in plain terms. I think we all take it to heart as transportation professionals. That being said, transportation has a slew of acronyms. We're actually in the process of updating our acronym guide right now to provide that to you. In your role as advisors to our process, we want to make sure you have as much information at your fingertips. So we're updating that, and I think it was well heard by multiple members today that we'll do our very best to speak in plain terms. Thank you.
Man, I noticed when that question came up, Alex was Johnny on the spot. That was good. So, Mr. Sevilla, and again, be mindful.
Yes,
we've got
absolutely.
presentation.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Great presentation again. Thank you guys so much for being here. Glad to see that there's extra routes being added for our providing them to the tourism corridors from MCO. It's great for our visitors. I'm thinking more for our workforce. Is there coordination? I'm assuming there is, but I'd love confirmation from you. Is there coordination between your services and major employers, particularly major employers? You mentioned a new route going into Epic Universe. Are there routes that are being always added, optimized for the workforce? Is there a route being added to go to the employee services building there at Epic? Thinking about the Magic Kingdom, cast member services building, I see one Lynx bus, in a slew of Disney transportation buses, but how is that coordination happening to make sure that the workforce is getting to work as efficiently as possible, particularly to those locations? Thank you.
So briefly, things like Disney, Airport, Universal, the single site large employers. Yeah, our service planning team engages with them. They take any kind of feedback, ship changes, hiring, new properties opening up. And then we'll have a conversation with them about access to the property. What do they feel is necessary for us? And then we'll adjust our services accordingly. They don't fund the services. So then it kind of gets back to conversation with, in this specific instance, Orange County, what would make sense within their budget to increase frequency or shift start times earlier based off of what we're seeing needed for the employees.
Wonderful, thank you. And Ms. Council, I'll have you close us out here.
Is there a certain amount of funding that would come into one bus stop versus another one? Like in the Marigold area, you have a bus stop that's by the APV, the HOA. They have a nice little bench, they have a nice little light, they have something covering them. But then the one on San Lorenzo, the one on Deerwood, the one that goes all the way out, it's what the gentleman said, there's a pole and there's a garbage can there. Now, my problem is that the workforce, those people that are going to work this morning, I felt sorry for each and every one of them between the rain, the cold, and everything else that was out there. But the children that are sitting by those bus stops in the dark at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, cars are, they're sitting on the ground, so cars can't even see that they're on the floor. Because a simple lamppost that could have been by this bus stop could have helped so much. So who determines how much funding goes into which bus stop in which corner? And does the APV get more funding because they are the APV than San Lorenzo that has no lights whatsoever?
So a couple pieces to that. We don't have access to control any kind of lighting beyond like a solar lighting. So we try to our best where the geometry makes sense of locating the stop underneath the street pole. Funding, it's the same. We have one pot of money to fund all the bus stops across the region. So the only time we might spend more money is for design and engineering. If we've kind of taken all the low-hanging fruit for the most part, so it'll require more concrete, more design as we close in ditches and increase access from, say, a setback sidewalk. So just because of where it's located or who might reside next to it has no bearing whatsoever. That would be a violation on our part in terms of Title VI and making sure we're not discriminating based off of background or income. So that's not a concern there. Now, if a community or a business wanted to provide additional funding, then we can have a targeted agreement for that and say at bus stop number 2, they want to have a shelter, they're funding the delta beyond what we said is necessary for that. And that.
So are the businesses from that, I'm sorry, are the businesses around that area invited to these meetings so that they can have a way of participating?
Depends on.
Because I didn't even know that a business can participate like that.
It often is a district, like the I Drive Tourist District. You can see some of the more artistic shelters along there. That was a specific one. You might have a Main Street district, Gateway Orlando, as you're heading north on 436. They paid for painting and a little emblem put on those shelters to support kind of the maintenance of those. Very rarely is it a single stop that you see that. You might have a county or city commissioner wanting to put in some, I don't know, stylistically different shelters. You see those on Mills and 50 in the Mills 50 area.
Yeah, all the areas you just mentioned are more active areas than the residential area that I'm talking about. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank both of you gentlemen. I appreciate your time and coming here. You can see we're very excited to have Lynx here. So please.
We're normally sitting in the back, but if it pleases Metro Plan staff, we're happy to come by.
Understood. Thank you again. I appreciate it. We've got 10 minutes and our speed talking skills up. We've got FDOT tentative 5-year work program.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. Kathy Alexander Corbin. I will be brief. I will be quick. I will encourage you, please, to check out the work program that is online as well as what we provide today and send any questions you might have post-meeting. We will be glad to answer those. But I'll go ahead and get started. So again, this is our annual process. We were here last year and we're discussing the tentative work program when we're talking about fiscal years 26 through fiscal year 30. And that begins July 1st of 25 all the way through June 30th of 30. So we went through the process, an annual process of putting this together and what it represents of the transportation priorities in the upcoming 5 years. And that involves transit, seaport, spaceport, airport, as well as multimodal. as well as all the needs that we have in transportation planning, transportation systems management operations, engineering design, right-of-way acquisition, and construction and maintenance activities. So each district develops their tentative work program. These are then combined with all the other districts. They are submitted to central office where they become the statewide tentative work program. Ultimately, they get submitted to the governor and legislature for the review and ultimate approval and adoption July 1st. What you see here, the key dates for this tentative cycle. In December last year, we held our work program public hearing, both virtually and in person. We submitted our tentative work program to central office just last week. It is now going to go under our executive review for the DOT secretary. It'll then go to FTC, which is Florida Transportation Commission review. That occurs in March, ultimately going through legislator and approval in July, like I mentioned. So we fund the tentative work program based on priorities, and that's how you see these laid out here. Safety is foremost, top and most prioritized in everything that we do across all of our projects. We then have to meet system and maintenance preservation. This includes payment conditions for our state highway system, state maintained bridges, and maintenance of our state highways. Next, we have meeting statutory requirements for public transportation, such as aviation, transit, rail, ports. And although we are not the lead agency for these systems, the funding does funnel through the district work program. So once all of these priorities are laid out and we balance and we build the work program, anything that's left over could be discretionary funding and sometimes used for capacity projects or any new project needs. As you can see, there is an inverse reaction as we have cost estimate increases or we have any critical needs. Those take precedent over any kind of discretionary use of whatever's left over, if there is anything left over. Now, if those needs are less, then we have more money left over so we can introduce new projects or introduce capacity into the work program. For this cycle, it's always a challenge because there's always a lot more needs than there is funding. And what we try to do is leverage all available funding, everything that we have across the board, looking at delivering regionally important projects. So there really was a focus to try to on what is the benefit of the projects that we're putting out, making sure that we continue to deliver on those projects that were already programmed in the upcoming 4 years. The 5th year is the new year. So that is when we typically have the opportunity to add anything else. We also limited our programming to just estimate updates. So any new project phases or any new projects were really scrutinized just because of the funding limitations that we have, the budgetary constraints as we have seen over the last few years with inflationary impacts across the district, in particular for any kind of construction transportation project cost resources. And we also minimized project schedules. We really look at well, how can we deliver the projects without having to affect a project, deferring a project or deleting a project? Typically, the deleting is not a warranted action unless there's some other reason that's taking place, but sometimes the deferral does have to take because of the balancing component that we have to do and there's not enough needs. There's not enough funding, I apologize. So for this tentative work program, these were some of the influencing factors that we had to face. In terms of allocation and revenues, we are balanced based on what we receive and also what is estimating from the revenue estimating conference. These are still very conservative. We did not receive more than what we anticipated. We all understand we're coming back from some very high inflation variability and cost pricing indices over the last few years. So that is still relevant and is you can see that in what we received in our allocations. We had a slight increase in terms of the rental car surcharge projections, but we saw a slight decrease in state funds due to the reductions of revenue projections. Another impact were the decisions and policies and the statutes that take place over the year. During this development cycle, the resurfacing program allocations were decreased statewide. And the reason for this adjustment was due to allocate funding to some legislative changes that took place in the last few years, and also to address critical statewide needs and programs identified through the department's planning program workshop, which occurs every spring before we get started on the tentative. For this year, what they were looking for is to reallocate some of the funding from the resurfacing program to high critical priority statewide programs, such as the bridge repair and replacement, truck parking, maintenance, ITS, which is Intelligent Transportation Systems Maintenance, rest areas, as well as the safety program. And then we see the economic variables that are still taking shape. Luckily for fiscal year 25, we are seeing somewhat of a stabilized result on our lettings. We're seeing some savings coming back from our bid lettings. However, when we build the tentative, we're talking about pricing in July. And at that point, we were still seeing significant increases. And what you can see here for earthwork, traffic signals, and asphalt, compared to the previous year, they were still pretty significant. So what we're hoping is that some of these trends in the last few months, first 6 months of the fiscal year 25 is going to help us out in the long run. However, for building the tentative, it was still a challenge. You may recall last year I shared a slide or an exhibit that showed the increase for a 1 mile lane typical for resurfacing. And it was like almost a 25% increase from the previous year, from 23 to 24. When we go back and look over the 3 years, it was a cumulative increase average of about 17%. That's cumulative over the 3 years. So we're still seeing increased costs. However, like I mentioned, we are seeing some stabilizing costs, and so far the cost per mile for that resurfacing 1 mile typical is actually reduced 3%. So that's uplifting, but we're still waiting to make sure that this trend carries on. Here you see a breakout of the county, for the counties, Orange, Osceola, and Seminole, for what we have represented in the upcoming tentative work program. You can see the total overall for the Metro Plan region is $2.2 billion. Here is the breakdown by project type, and they're broken out by the Orange, Osceola, and Seminole. Again, I won't cover them for the sake of time, but please review. And if there's any questions as to this, we can provide the information as to how these numbers are generated. I will note for Orange County, we do have about $250 million in aviation. So these are numbers why you're seeing some of those higher on one county versus the other. There's also I-4 moving forward of projects represented in Orange County. And we also have one of the regional priorities, State Road 50 East. It's a capacity project, and that's also a significant project with funding represented in the upcoming tentative work program. For Osceola County, they have a roadway improvement project, John Young Parkway at Pleasant Hill, that remained in fiscal year 28. However, the funding on that increased. So there is significant funding allocated for that in the upcoming 5 years. That's a significant project represented in these figures. And then for Seminole County, we have truck parking that was programmed last year, as well as a local project, the Wekiva Trails Tunnel, State Road 434 and 436. So that's why that number is significantly high there. All right, project highlights. I'm trying to move quickly. If I'm talking too fast, I apologize. All right, so I'm not going to go through every project. It'll take too long. What we wanted to do is just highlight new funding on project phases and projects that in the work program. The only projects that received funding were really projects that were, again, already programmed or maybe specified funding that is eligible for that. And that's why it was introduced into the tentative. Resurfacing, this is a state program area. There's a couple projects in Orange County that we programmed this year. You'll see those. There's a total about 13 miles there in Orange County on 436 and 437. Osceola had one project along US 192. About 25 miles, that's a long one. As you can see, these projects have design in the first year and construction in the third year. And then moving on to Seminole. Seminole had the bulk of our new resurfacing projects. And there's 4 projects in Seminole County for a total of over 25 miles that you see there. Additions. What you see here for this project on the left-hand side, this actually is a project that was in the program already. You may have known 239203-7 and 8. These were 2 sections of State Road 50 East that were widening. There was a widening project. The -7 project was broken out into segments, 2 segments. So the project still remains, but it's now broken up into 2 parts with a priority section over on the west end of that previous section is going out in 27, which was the original year for the -7 project. So we have new 2 FM numbers for those segments, 456096-1 and 456096-2, and you could see the funding and the years allocated for those 2 new segments. On the right-hand side, we see a federal earmark project, and this is a project with Seminole County that they will be delivering it. And that is widening for, it's a city of Oviedo, and it's a federal oversight project for County Road 419. Some of that funding that we have specialized is safety funding, and that we were able to program some new projects on that. As you can see, the bulk of these projects, the 3 on the left and the top one on the right, are all operational improvements that are funded with the safety funds that the district receives. And then the bottom 2 on the right, we have an operational improvement over in Richmond Avenue, and that's over in Sanford. And then we have an urban corridor improvement project, with this is a combination of local funds with the TMA funds from Metro Plan. So that is a project also that are improving roadway and intersections within our area. And then we have 439040, an intersection improvement project. This is being designed by Seminole County, and this is just some creative funding. We had a project that was going out. Seminole provided the funding. That project is now being included in ours. So we're able to expedite the construction by combining the funding. Couple of pedestrian and bike projects, sidewalk gap bundles in Orange County. You can see we have design, program, and construction for that in 28 and 30. And then we also have a safe routes to school. This is building sidewalks along elementary school. This is for Hickory Tree Elementary School Phase 1. This is in the St. Cloud area. The construction for the sidewalks are programmed in 26, which is the first year. Critical project for us in Orange County, Seminole, and Osceola is the importance of truck parking. So be pleased to share that we do have funding allocated for design, at least for Orange County. This is known as the Sand Lake John Young parking location. We have $4.5 million in fiscal year 27. And then we also have the funding for right-of-way environmental and construction for the Osceola County location. You see a total of about $67 million there for the years noted. And then we have the commuter rail, Central Florida commuter rail. This is the Sunrail Bridge over 1792 over in South Maitland. There's also funding for that, $84 million for that rail preservation project. The final design is underway and the construction is intended for 27. Additional funding for the aviation, for our airports in the area. We have several within our counties. You could see this is just new funding. Again, not everything. This is new funding. $32 million for taxiway improvements for Orange Orlando International Airport. $2.7 billion for infrastructure improvements for Orange Executive Airport. And then $27.5 million for operational preservation capacity projects in Seminole, Orlando, Sanford Airport. I did mention sometimes there's the situation we have to defer projects. The -8 project of the State Road 50, this is the most furthest east section, -8. That project was deferred. It was previously in 29. It is now in 30. It still remains in the upcoming 5 years. And what that allowed us to do is first to be able to balance and also to be able to accommodate so we don't have an overlap with construction with those projects on the eastern side. We had a project in Orange County. This was a traffic signal project, the construction and construction support, which is the construction engineering inspection services, was deferred from 26 to 28 for balancing purposes. And like I mentioned, resurfacing lane mile program was reallocating some of the funds to other needs. We had one project in Orange County that was deferred because of that need. It was 27 to 29. However, the payment conditions can hold up for that delay in timeframe. And then over on the right, we had 239422-1, that's State Road 434. This is a project in Orange County where that was also deferred from 29. It was deferred from 28, to 29 in order to balance the work program this cycle. One project did advance, the Seminole Orlando Sanford Airport. As you can see, they had roadway improvements. That project came in from 28 into 27. We have several deleted projects. Again, it's kind of intimidating when you look at all of these, but really there was reason and there was justification and coordination that took place on all of these. On the left-hand side, you see sidewalk bundle projects that were deleted in coordination with the agency. What they did is they consolidated all the construction into one segment and deleted all the others. On the right, you see two projects that were deleted at the request of the agency because they had built the sidewalks already. So there was no need for that future programming. And then there was the Seminole County North Street Complete Street, that agency Seminole County elected to construct that with their own funding as opposed to what was programmed. A couple more deleted projects. Here you see the administrative, we deleted the -7 of the State Road 50 East widening. Again, it was deleted, the number was deleted, but the funding is still there and the projects are now represented with two new different FM numbers. Then we have I-4. This was an add lane to reconstruct. That project there was actually incorporated into the governor's initiative projects moving Florida forward. So that effort still remains. We have Seminole County State Road 434, that's a traffic operations improvement. They were needing right-of-way funds. The right-of-way funding was removed. They were able to adjust the scope, so that's why that funding was removed on that project, and that was deleted. On the right-hand side, we do have 434 Seminole County, a resurfacing project. Actually, there's two of those. These were concrete projects that were identified for rehabilitative efforts from central office, and turns out they weren't needed. So after further review on those payment conditions, it turns out the concrete pavement was not going to be considered, so those projects were deleted. And one project was moved out for landscaping along I-4, which at the end of the day, they prefer to wait until the moving forwards are completed so they can come back and do the landscaping. A couple more deleted projects. Again, I can go through these, but for the sake of time, I really will let you go ahead and review them. Same reason, there's reasons why there was reprioritization and coordination that took place in all of those. I advise grants, there's funding outside of the work program, grant opportunities are available. There's her contact for Alice Giuliani, who would be more than glad to share information on any grants that are upcoming. We did participate in several Hurricane Helene and Milton response. There's a video there. Feel free to watch that. We could send it. It's in the presentation. Feel free to watch that at your own time. We were glad to assist not just the communities, but also the other districts with any kind of responses to their hurricanes. And with that, I complete my presentation.
Thank you very much. And seeing we're about 7 minutes over, we've got two, these are presentations. These are not action items. If anybody does have to excuse themselves, be my guest. Hold 1 second. Who's representing the Turnpike Enterprise? That's, I'm thinking probably, can we move that back to the next month?
Our next. Mr. Chair, we could do that, but our next month's agenda will also be full. Our options at this point would be that we hang in and let Mr. Fine present, or possibly we could encourage members to watch his presentation at the TAC and TISMO meetings. We could also send the presentation out. I would yield to the will of the group. I don't know.
Well, it seems like the group is dwindling,
There's
is
not much
why I
of a group.
ask, which is unfortunate. I think we started off this meeting with talking about being reliable, transportation reliability. And unfortunately, we are never reliable on our time. How many people actually still have questions that went unanswered? It's through no fault of yours. I saw that you were really going fast. But I'm willing to stay, folks, but I don't know if it's going to be a disservice to everybody else. I guess we'll go with Plan B. Like you said, we will hear the presentation and then everybody's welcome to watch it on the TISMO. Is that?
If you would like to do that, Mr. Chair, I think we could go ahead and do it here, and then we could also distribute for those who have had to leave.
That would work. Alex?
Yeah, I would concur with Mary Ann, just given the size of the group, knowing that it's not action. We'll send that link out. You're going to hear it twice this Friday. And then after the presentation, we'll also send out, remember all of our presentations are streamed and recorded on YouTube. So we'll make sure we send that out with a timestamp to make sure you guys can listen in to a non-rush version of both presentations.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So you're going to speak at the TISMO and we'll chime in there. My apologies that you weren't able to present today. But thank you very much.
Do we still have questions?
We do have some questions. So, okay. Judy?
What is the price per mile now on asphalt? You danced all the way around it. It went down in percentage, it went up in percentage. Great presentation, but thank you.
Thanks so much, Judy. I appreciate that.
Appreciate your
Yes.
speed talking there.
I was trying to fly, and percentages sometimes, yes, are not really relative because it depends on the dollar, but we were talking about 2021, 751,000, sorry, per lane mile for a resurfacing project. And then in 23 was $1.13 million, and we're now at 1.18. So you're still 55% over what our previous low was. So we're still seeing increases overall, and that's just the resurfacing. I could
That's
send
per lane.
That's per mile
lane
for a
mile.
4-lane divided typical with
Okay.
flush shoulders. So what I'll do is I'll specify and I'll send you the exhibit that has that breakdown so it can be shared with everybody.
Thank you very much. That was quick. And Mr. Pigram, you have the floor, sir.
All right. Thank you again. Wonderful presentation. Love the infographics. Fantastic organization. The project you highlighted about the Sunrail 1792 bridge, I believe the secretary brought that up to the board last time, letting them know that that 84 million was allocated. That is one of 3 pieces of the Sunrail corridor that siphons to a single track. I think the other one is in Kissimmee, but that's being revitalized with a Chrissy grant and should reopen with 2 tracks soon. The other is St. John's Bridge, which is a whole different issue. When they replace this bridge, is that going to remove the siphon and be a 2-track bridge, or is it just a 1-for-1 replacement?
I will find out for you and report back to you on what it is, the
Okay.
intent on it.
Cool, cool, cool. And then the other just broad question is in the beyond the ultimate scope that is, I think, part of I-4 moving forward now, the fantastic improvements that are going on in Orange County when near Darrell Carter and 536 and all the work that your team is doing is going to be life-changing. So excited to see Darrell Carter come online. There was at one point a request, I think, of $50 million for the state to preserve part of the I-4 corridor for Brightline that the governor turned down. And since then, Brightline, and from what I understand, has let go their Tampa expansion team because of that decision. Do you have any update on those negotiations with preserving right-of-way for Brightline or any of that?
I do not, but I will take it back and get a response for you.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Pigram. I'm sure that probably has something to do with those auxiliary lanes that are being installed on I-4 this year. That, they just come up with that additional money and all of a sudden build another lane.
Those are all, most of
27.
those projects are part of the Moving Forward initiative. We have several, I-4 being the big component of that. And yes, it is the aux lanes along I-4 for that.
Got it. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Nice presentation, man.
Sorry for so quickly, but thank you.
Quit it. Take it. So that concludes our presentations. Several, as I mentioned, there are several items for consideration under general information, upcoming meetings. We now at the member comments. Any committee members who want to make final comments? Mr. Pigram?
Just real quick, Brightline update. I know it's not a public entity, but they do have public facing documentation. So they've gone from 4 cars to 5 cars. So they're operating 5-car trains now. The stations are sized for 10-car trains. They're planning and working with Siemens, the provider. They're going to be upgrading the fleet to 7-car trains by the summer. They just received a $34 million grant from the government. So they did get some public funding to enhance that fleet size because of the public service it's providing. So that's exciting that their fleet within 2 years of operating in Orlando is growing by 75% physically. And right now there are roughly about 28 flights every day between Orlando Airport and South Florida, and Brightline's ridership exceeds all of those airline seats combined. So just, so.
And yet your last comment was that Brightline just let go of their Tampa team because,
Yes.
it just is baffling. I just don't get it. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Any other member comments on anything? Brings us to the second opportunity for public comments. Comments heard at this point in the meeting are more general nature, similar to the first. Comments may be made in person or online. Members of the public joining us virtually who wish to speak, we use the raise hand feature on the Zoom screen. If attending by phone, you can hit *9, raise your hand, request to be recognized. When you're called, the staff will unmute your mic and you'll be asked to state your name, contact information for the record. Is there anybody online that wishes to make a comment?
There are no hands raised online, Mr. Chairman, and we've received no comments from the room.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It's that time savings, right? Then with that being said, no further business. I adjourn the meeting. Y'all have a wonderful day. Be safe.
Thank you.